Now today, KTM announced the full details of their upcoming AMT, or automated manual transmission, which is set to make its way to at least one of their new bikes for 2025, and it'll allow you to ride the bike without having to operate the clutch or shifter. This is a trend that we're seeing across the industry at the moment, with a couple of other manufacturers announcing similar systems at pretty much the same time. But thing is, from the details announced today, it seems like KTM have gone for a slightly different approach. And so in this video, we'll go through all of the details along with the pros and cons of their slightly alternative system. The basic idea of an AMT is to offer some of the functionality of a more complex system like Honda's dual clutch transmission, but without the same level of cost and additional weight, simply by adapting an existing engine. There are no huge changes, for example, to Yamaha's CP3, which was recently made available on their MT-09 Naked with AMT. Now essentially what they've done here is fitted a pair of electronic actuators, one that can operate the clutch on your behalf and one that can operate the gearbox. These are controlled by an electronic control unit which can make decisions about when to shift gear and when to pull the clutch in or let it out. And you can run it in either an automatic mode where the bike chooses the gears for you, or a manual mode where you choose the gears yourself but just with some buttons on the switchgear. But ultimately, if you stick it in that automatic mode, it is really minimal work because there's no need to operate the clutch, it's just behaving like a twist and go. And there's no need to touch the shifter or the buttons because that actuator is going to go up and down the box on your behalf. Effectively, you can think of this as pretty much the same engine, it's just that those two actuators replicate what happens with your hand on the clutch, for example, and your left foot on the shifter. Now, from what I can gather, this is a very similar approach to what BMW have recently announced for the 2025 version of the R1300 GS and the R1300 GS Adventure, both of which are going to be available with their ASE, or automated shifter system. That's basically just their name for AMT. And also some recent spy shots suggest it could make its way to other models soon, like the R1300 RT touring bike, which was spied without a clutch lever. Now, like I say, the full details of KTM's system were announced today, and although they haven't necessarily confirmed exactly which bikes it'll be on, there are some interesting differences here in the way this system will operate. So yes, it's got the same actuator on the gearbox as per the other two systems, and again, that's going to allow you to run it in either an automatic mode or a manual, so you never have to touch the shifter. Then again, like the other two systems, there's no clutch lever, so you don't need to bother with that either. But this time, instead of an electronic actuator, they've actually used a mechanical centrifugal clutch. So as opposed to an electronic device that pulls in and lets out the clutch as per its instructions from the control unit, a centrifugal clutch simply engages when the engine starts to spin faster. That means when you're at a standstill and the engine is just ticking over, it disengages, so there's no need to hold the clutch lever in, for example, when you're at a stop. But as soon as you twist the throttle and the engine starts to spin up, that's when it engages, and so you'll move away. Now, centrifugal clutches are not necessarily new. They've existed for some time. I think predominantly you most commonly see them on dirt bikes, but also quite a few MV Agusta models have been available with them, like the Turismo Veloce or some of their Nakeds, as part of their smart clutch system offering. These bikes give you that twist and go riding experience, although they don't offer the full AMT system because you still have a traditional gearbox, albeit with a quick shifter, but you still have to make the shifts with your left foot. So I guess the question now is, why have KTM gone down a different route to the other two manufacturers who've gone like full electric? Well, one thing that they say in the press release specifically is that, in their own words, the careful engineering of the AMT gearbox maintains traditional gearbox proportions along with keeping the weight well within the same ballpark. So if you look at a bike like the Honda CB650R E-Clutch, which came out last year, that doesn't have an automatic gearbox, but it does have the electronically actuated clutch. Then you'll see on the spec sheet, if you compare it with the manual equivalent, that it adds almost 3 kilograms to the total weight. The MT-09 is the same, that's almost 3 kilograms more than the standard manual bike as well. And so while it doesn't seem like a huge amount, it has to be said that KTM do pride themselves on the sportiness and performance of their bikes. And so if they feel like an electronically actuated clutch was unnecessary and could be effectively replicated with something mechanical that's simpler, that's lighter, that's potentially more cost-effective as well, then I suppose that makes absolute sense. That is assuming, of course, though, that this mechanical centrifugal clutch is as refined and easy to use as an electronically actuated clutch. I have had chance on a couple of occasions now to ride MV Agustas with that SCS or Smart Clutch system. Most recently on the Isle of Man at a METZELER tyre launch when I took for half of the day, I think, the Turismo Veloce SCS. Now look, there could be some other variables at play here. You don't know how recently that bike's been serviced or what sort of condition that SCS system was in. But I will say it does take quite a bit getting used to, and I didn't think that it felt that refined at low speeds. In fact, it felt a little bit grabby, and for a fairly tall bike in some fairly wet conditions, I just found it unnerving and like I was wishing I had just a regular clutch. Certainly the E-clutch on the CB650R, which I tried a couple of months back, was a lot more easy to get on with, and so yeah, I'm interested to see how the KTM compares to some of the other systems when we actually get to review them. One of the other things that KTM mentioned in this press release today is that the AMT system has a couple of different settings so you can get it dialed into your specific taste. So they say it's got multiple shifting modes that tie in with the riding modes, and so presumably it'll do stuff like DCT, Honda's dual clutch transmission, where it holds onto the gears a bit longer in a sport mode so you can access more of the top end peak power. And again, you've got this from the other manufacturers as well with their AMTs. So the MT-09 from Yamaha has a couple of different settings for both the manual and automatic modes. So the question for me here is whether there's any variation in how the electronic clutch behaves on some of the other systems, or whether it's all down to just tailoring the behavior of the electronic actuator on the gearbox. I guess with the mechanical clutch on the KTM, it's fixed in its behavior, and so maybe, like I say, we won't know until I get to ride one, but perhaps the other systems will be a bit more refined and nuanced. In the meantime, before we get to ride them, there are some other details announced today which give us some idea of how it'll behave, with KTM confirming that their manual mode will be operated with buttons on the switchgear like the Yamaha. The BMW, on the other hand, uses a dummy foot shifter, and so I guess which one's better will come down to personal preference. It is worth pointing out though that Honda kind of offer both with their DCT, because the default is the buttons on the switchgear, but on some bikes like the Africa Twin you can fit an accessory foot shifter, which might make more sense if you're trying to shift standing up, for example. Like the other systems as well, the sequence of the gears is a little bit different, so as opposed to first, neutral, second and so on, these bikes will have a park mode at the bottom of the box, so you'll be able to leave it in gear so it won't roll away. Then you've got neutral, then first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. I think this will take a little bit of getting used to, although it'll probably become second nature once you've been on the bike for a few minutes. But I think one of the most appealing features of it is a bit of a side benefit, and it's with regards to that parking mode. You see, nothing is ever really going to stop your bike being lifted into the back of a van and driven off, but actually in the city where motorcycle crime is probably at its highest, that's not really how many bikes are stolen, because of course once that van gets stuck in traffic, if it's being tailed by police, there's not really any way to get away. It's very common, I've seen this a lot when I was living in London and used my bike there. For bikes to be stolen by a pair of riders, they'll stop at the bike on a scooter. If they can break the locks, they'll put it in neutral. One will sit on the bike and steer it, and the other will use the scooter or bike that they came on and push it with their foot. This way, if they get followed, they can just ditch the stolen bike and both jump on the other bike and then make a quick getaway by cutting through the traffic. With this though, you can put it in park, and then the only way to get it into neutral would be to have the keys, start the bike up, and use the buttons to get the electronic actuator to pop it into neutral. So effectively, you can kind of leave it locked in park, and that means it's pretty much impossible to push it away. I think this is going to be really appealing to city riders. I mean, clearly there's a big benefit to not having to use the clutch in stop-start traffic, but also that's a really nice security bonus that I think will have people really considering one of these AMT bikes. Now, like I said, there's no exact confirmation on which bikes this system will be fitted to. There's no confirmation either about how much it weighs or how much extra it'll cost versus the manual equivalent, but KTM do have a lot of new bikes being announced over the next few weeks, and so I definitely recommend keeping your eyes peeled if you're interested in this sort of thing. You'd have to imagine the Super Adventure S would be a prime candidate, and an update to that model is due in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, if you're not subscribed already, do hit subscribe if you want to see the full details of that update as soon as it goes live. As always, I'd love to know what you think of this new tech, so do let me know down in the comments below, and also whether you truly believe a centrifugal clutch is going to be as refined as the electronic equivalent. In fact, if you want a bit more detail on the Honda e-clutch to get some idea of what it's like to ride, then I'll put my full video on the screen now so you can give it a click and give it a watch in case you haven't already. Like I say, do hit subscribe if you want more of the latest motorcycle news along with all the biggest bike announcements over this launch season. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.